Do both. End of video. Alright, before you click away, there are a lot of details that are important when implementing dumbbells or barbells into your training. So I'm going to break this video into 3 parts. The first part is going to be the theory, the second part is going to be the actual science, and the third part is going to be practical recommendations. A lot of videos that I see, they talk about the science, but they don't actually tell you what to do. They don't give you some practical recommendations to implement into your own training. Because while I want my videos to be based in science, I also want them to be useful, practical, pragmatic. And if you aren't getting that information and then applying it to your own training, well, there's no real point in getting that information. You have to actually apply it to have it be useful. So first let's get into the theory of barbells versus dumbbells, and let's start with the advantages of dumbbells. So when you're using dumbbells, you're obviously trying to manipulate 2 separate objects, and this usually forces your body to stabilize a lot more. So if you're doing an incline dumbbell press, you have to force yourself to stabilize these 2 objects, which is going to work a little bit more of your upper back and your shoulders, as well as your core. And personally, I look at this as a big advantage, just because it will help you become more well-rounded, more injury-resistant, and more athletic. And because of this can help you identify any muscle imbalances. So sometimes if you're using a barbell, you might not notice that your left and your right sides are slightly different in strength. Or maybe your shoulder or your hip alignment is slightly off. Maybe there's a left to right imbalance. And while I think dumbbells might not be able to correct this as much as some people think, I think they are great for identifying the fact that there's a problem. If you only use barbells, you might be favoring one side without actually realizing it. And then when you go to dumbbells, you might say, oh, well, my left arm is locking out before my right arm. There must be some kind of issue there. And you might be able to use this to help correct imbalances. But generally speaking, I think you're going to want to use other methods, which I can go into in another video. Another huge advantage of dumbbells is range of motion. Whether it's doing a deadlift or a chest press or a shoulder press, typically dumbbells will allow you to get more range of motion. What you're seeing here is a deficit deadlift, but there's only a deficit that can go so deep, for the simple reason that my feet get in the way. If you're using dumbbells, however, you could theoretically get even more range of motion. Same thing with a chest press. You are limited with how deep you can go because your torso simply gets in the way. Your chest will hit the bar and you can't go any deeper. Whereas if you're using dumbbells, there's really no limit to how deep you can go. You're just limited by your flexibility. So you can get a great range of motion and really get a good stretch on the pecs, which is very much correlated with muscle growth. You can also get a better squeeze at the top of the motion. When you're using a dumbbell, you can come across the body and almost touch the dumbbells. Whereas if you're bench pressing with a bar, well, you just can't do that because you're holding the bar and you can't bring your arm across unless you let go of the barbell, which I would not advise. That is poor technique. If you're doing a one-arm row using a dumbbell, you can get a massive stretch on the lats and on the traps in the bottom position, and you can also get a better contraction. Because it is a unilateral movement, you can actually get a much better squeeze on that lat. The lat actually can only fully contract when you are squeezing down. You're actually sort of like crunching your torso down to the side. And so there's simply no way to get a full lat contraction when doing a barbell row. It's just not possible. Furthermore, some movements simply are not possible when using a barbell. So something like a lateral raise, you can't do it with a barbell. You can try to do like an upright row, which is sort of just a crappier version of a lateral raise, to be honest. But there's really no way to really replace that movement using a barbell. That is an exclusively dumbbell exercise, and it's a fantastic one. Another big advantage of dumbbells that a lot of people don't talk about is that you don't have to wait for a machine. So if you're bench pressing with a barbell, you have to wait for someone else to finish using it a lot of the time. Often there's just one bench, and if someone is using it, well, you have to work in with them, or you can't use it at all, depending on how big they are. But with dumbbells, you really just need the dumbbells and then a bench, which there are usually a lot more of. Another hugely important factor is freedom of movement. So this isn't just range of motion. This is where you can internally or externally rotate or move the way you want to move when you are using dumbbells. When you're using a barbell, you're sort of locked onto that bar. You can't really move as much as you want to move. And this can be a source of many joint problems, usually in the wrists or the elbows or the shoulders. Whereas when you're using dumbbells, that freedom of movement can help you to prevent injury. All right, so what are the advantages of barbells over dumbbells? Why should you use barbells in your training? Well, the first one is going to be stability. I realize I said stability is an advantage for dumbbells, but it's also an advantage for barbells. The fact that you are more stable with a barbell, this means that you are going to be able to move more weight, and you can really focus on the muscles that you want to be developing. Instead of just, being all over the place, you can really just focus on moving the bar back and forth. And this can often lead to more tension. So tension across the muscle, inside the muscle fiber, is going to be the main stimulator of growth. It's not metabolic stress, it's not muscle damage. Tension is what you want to be going for. And using a barbell, in many cases, is going to be a lot more tension than dumbbells. And this is primarily, again, because you can use more weight. You can overload the muscle. Another factor is that they are generally less awkward to use. So often you have to get dumbbells into position. You can see here in this incline press, if I was using like 40, 45, 50 kilos, that would be very, very difficult for me to get them in position. And often you'll see influencers on Instagram, they'll actually have someone give them the dumbbell. They'll actually have someone walk up and just hand them the dumbbell when they are pressing them. And honestly, I like to be able to train alone. I don't want to have someone having to spot me or hand me a freaking dumbbell. And this is a big advantage of barbells because you can train by yourself. Another very underrated factor is micro-loading. So if you're using dumbbells, sometimes there's a pretty big jump in between weights. So for example, at this gym, a few weeks ago, there was a 20 kilo dumbbell and a 30 kilo dumbbell, but there was no 25 kilo dumbbell. So when I'm doing an overhead press, 20 kilos is pretty much too light. I can do 20, 25 reps. And 30 kilos, it's a little bit on the heavy side. I can maybe do 6 to 8, maybe 10 reps, whereas I would prefer to be in that sort of 8 to 15 range. So for me, 25 to 27.5 kilo dumbbells is going to be ideal. But because they didn't have those, it becomes a little bit difficult to progress. Whereas with a barbell, you can always slap on a very small plate in order to micro-load the exercise. However, I would say the overall biggest advantage of barbells is when you are working the lower body. So this is a 140 kilo deadlift that I'm doing for 5 sets of 5. There are no dumbbells anywhere nearby that can replicate this stimulus. None. The dumbbells here only go up to 40 kilos, and in most gyms that I've seen, 40 kilos is the maximum. You might be lucky enough to have some dumbbells that are like 60, 70, maybe even 80 kilos, but that's pretty rare. So I think if you're doing a squat or a deadlift, especially, barbells are really indispensable. You need to be using those in your training to get maximum development. Sometimes I use the 40 kilo dumbbells for lunges, but it really is just a different movement, and you're going to want to be using barbells in your training. Also, if you have a home gym, a barbell and plates is probably going to be a better investment than a whole bunch of dumbbells. So if you really want to have dumbbells, you're going to need 5 kilos, 10 kilos, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, and even more to really get an effective workout. Furthermore, a barbell and plates is going to be easier to transport. Having to move, like if you move houses, having to move 30, 40, 50 kilo dumbbells is really going to be a pain. But if you just have to move a barbell and some 10, 20, 5 kilo plates, that's going to be much easier. So let's get into the science of dumbbells versus barbells. A 2011 paper by Saterbakken et al., they found that a dumbbell load was about 17% less than a barbell load. However, EMG activity in the pecs and in the front delt was the same. It did not differ significantly between the lifts. However, the triceps activation was a lot higher when using a barbell. And this makes sense. When you are bench pressing with a barbell, you can spread the bar. You can actually push outwards and the bar stays together because it's made out of iron. If you try to do this with dumbbells, well, you're going to end up with a nasty surprise just because the two dumbbells are not connected. And if you try to do that same movement pattern, well, the dumbbells are going to fall on the ground. And their conclusion was that high stability requirements in the chest press with dumbbells resulted in similar activation for those muscles, as well as lower triceps activation and more biceps activation. A 2017 paper by Ferreira et al., they found that muscle damage as well as muscle thickness between the dumbbells and barbells, as well as Smith machine, had no difference in the chest and in the front delts. Furthermore, they found that muscle soreness in the triceps was higher during a barbell, which you can see here. The triceps is a lot more active using a barbell. A very interesting study in 2017 by Ferreira et al., they found that if you took a barbell or a dumbbell bench press and you supersetted it with a tricep extension, you would actually get more reps with the dumbbell bench press. And this was because your triceps would be more fatigued from the barbell. They also found that you would get higher activation in the chest by using dumbbells. Another study by Saterbakken in 2013, they compared a standing and a seated barbell and dumbbell, so 4 lifts. And what they found was that the lift that required the most stability, the standing dumbbell press, actually had the lowest 1 rep max, but also the highest neuromuscular activity. And typically for rowing exercises, the results are pretty similar. You can use slightly more weight with a barbell, but activation might be slightly higher with dumbbells. Now, in terms of my practical recommendations, as I said before in the beginning of the video, yes, you should use both. However, there are some important considerations when setting up your programming. Alright, first, if you want a thick and juicy lower body, you are probably going to need to get familiar with using a barbell, just because that is an easier way to really overload the stronger musculature of the quads, the glutes, and the hamstring. For upper body, I think you should use much more of a mix of barbells and dumbbells. One school of thought is that you should use dumbbells before barbells. Other people say you should use barbells before dumbbells. And I think this boils down to your goals. If you are interested in strength, if you are a power lifter, you should probably put barbells before dumbbells and use the dumbbells to supplement your training as more of a muscle building stimulus. You want to be able to lift as much weight as possible and you want to be fresh so that you can do that. However, if you're more of a bodybuilder, it sort of makes sense to put dumbbells first. You don't really care how much weight you're lifting with the barbell. You just want to stay healthy. You want to build as much muscle as possible with putting the least amount of stress on your joints. So if you just care about muscle, I think putting dumbbells first is a pretty good strategy. In terms of sets, I think it's pretty much identical. If you do 6 sets of barbell or 6 sets of dumbbell, I don't think there's going to be that much of a difference. However, when it comes to rep range, I think it makes sense to do barbells for slightly lower reps and dumbbells for slightly higher reps, simply because if you're doing a 3 rep max with a barbell, that is quite possible. It's quite comfortable. It's feasible. If you try to do a 3 rep max with most dumbbell exercises, it's just not going to work. Trying to do a 3 rep max shoulder press, not a good idea. Just getting the weights in position is very, very challenging and potentially dangerous. So in summary, I think the vast majority of people should use both. Even if you're the most rabid, hardcore powerlifter, you can still get benefits from dumbbells. And even if you're the most rabid bodybuilder, you can still benefit from using a barbell. They are both just tools that you can use. They are both excellent variations, and I think you'd be very ill-advised not to use both. So use both. Let me know if you have any questions or comments down below, any advice for my channel. I sort of don't really know what I'm doing. I'll be honest, I'm sort of just winging it. So any professional or practical advice on how I can improve the channel is very much appreciated. Any editing ideas or video ideas, I am absolutely happy to hear. Let me know in the comments down below. Stay safe wherever you are. Hopefully you'll be back in the gym soon. And hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Hey!